Well, I'm here with Michael Kiernan, and Michael, this is the third of our Ward 3 interviews, and I'm happy to connect with you. So I'm going to start your interview off the same way I started the others, and have you just tell us about yourself. Who is Michael Kiernan?
Well, Michael Kiernan it's a 42-year-old Mike Kiernan versus the 22-year-old Kiernan, Mike Kiernan you met years ago, or the 28-year-old Mike Kiernan that got elected to the city council. Life has changed. I'm a proud father of a 2-year-old, and I'm kind of sick of partisan politics. And I like to see things come together, and I like to see things work. And I've always been involved in public policy, and I think that the city really has a need for someone to bring people together to focus on public safety and the core issues of aging infrastructure and keeping our progress growing. I mean, there's no doubt this community has just moved. It's been very progressive in its development. I was proud to take part of that when I was on the city council before, and that's why I want to keep moving forward.
Now, that's an answer to why you're running,
Yeah.
But we still want to know who is Michael Kiernan. Like, you know,
Well,
you can start off with what you remember. Like, one day I remember going outside and my mom was taking me to school. You know.
So I grew up until I was 10 years old on a farm in Madison County, where my parents were both very politically active. My mother was a political activist. My father was a farmer, but he was a county supervisor. And, well, you know, things that happened were, you know, like in my life when I was young was like the Harkin steak fry started on our farm. I remember always, you know, door to door in the fall season for the county candidates, not just people in my family, but for candidates in traveling the state with my mom. My parents got divorced in 1985, and then my mom moved herself and I have 3 older brothers. We moved to a small house right behind the Des Moines Community Playhouse, and that's where she still lives today.
So you're the youngest.
I am the youngest.
I say that because I'm the youngest. I'm not the baby. I remember one day my brother was a real stud wrestler, and one day he forgot that I was the youngest and not the baby, and I had to like.
Did you wrestle?
I wasn't that good, but I was good enough that by the time I was 20, I was good enough to, like, because he's 11 years older than me, cradle him, hold him up in front of the whole neighborhood, you know, and that baby stuff stopped. So you were the youngest.
I was the youngest. My oldest brother's Matt, and the second one's Dan, and then Pete, and then myself. And so it's a small house right behind the Des Moines Community Playhouse, and we grew up there and had kind of a scrappy living. So I guess it's what you would call it. We worked at a place, I don't know if you remember, Tate Super Value.
Oh, absolutely.
Kind of job
it's
there.
No Hy-Vee drug town.
Yeah, I think it was. Well, we were all of my brothers and I worked there sacking groceries for Bob Tate, and you know, things were a little rough. I left high school early to get a job. I was offered a job at actually a Quick Trip to manage a Quick Trip at night, and believe it or not, they paid very well. So I was able to actually go back to school and help pay off bills and stuff like that. Went on to Wartburg College in Waverly and returned back here to Des Moines in 1997. And you know, things happen in life. I went on to be, as you listen, city council person, and I've run political campaigns. I think I met you when I was probably 22 years old. And I went on, you know, to be the chair of the Democratic Party. I left the city council because I really don't think partisanship should be in local government like that. And then, as you know, I had some health issues when I was chair of the Democratic Party. And then after that, I've just kind of been out of politics. And really, the last 2 years, people know my wife better. Obviously, she's better looking, and she's on TV.
So who's your wife?
Erin? Yeah, exactly. We had.
You gotta tell them for those who might not know.
Oh yeah, well.
One person watching who might not know.
She's Erin Kiernan. She works for the Good Show. She's been very successful. I'm very lucky. She's a brilliant person, and I've been blessed to meet her. And we're actually coming up on our 17th wedding anniversary, and today is actually my son's 2-year birthday. He was born at 2:02 p.m. exactly 2 years ago, and so we had tried for a long time to have a child, and it was tough. We went through a lot of infertility treatments in public, and so when we had the baby, we always wanted this baby, but no one thought about who was going to take care of the baby. So I travel a lot, and so I kind of give that up because she's at work at nights. So the last 2 years, I've been president and CEO of Little Michael Inc. And
It's a real job.
oh,
I say that because it's a real job.
yeah, no, I know. I get some people who say, "Oh, so you really don't do anything," and I say, "Wait a minute, no, actually, it's the toughest job I've probably ever had. Most rewarding, but the toughest job I ever had." And
You were probably more responsible than me. I watched my grandbaby, right, all last year for months and months, right?
right.
I watched my grandbaby, but I always knew I got to send him home, right? So we have things on tape, like when I'm shooting whipped cream in his mouth,
But your grandparents are very important because I can tell you, if it wasn't for my mother, she was the sanity in my life for the last 2 years. And it really was what a wonderful time because I was able to see her more probably than I'd seen her in years. just because we had the little one and she'd come over and. So but there's the grandma and grandpa effect, which is, you get, I know that my wife and I took our first trip after about a year and a half, and we came home. My mom said, "Well, he just keeps wanting donuts," and I said, "Well, he's never had a donut," and I was kind of confused. And on top of our fridge was this little pack of mini donuts, and I was like, "Mom," and she goes, "Well, I didn't give him the chocolate ones, only the powdered sugar ones."
Oh, listen, my grandson, I discovered, I was so proud when I sent a video of his first real meal that I gave him, because his was basically chocolate and goldfish, right?
Yeah.
Unless they were chocolate goldfish, because I didn't know they had the chocolate.
I didn't know they had chocolate goldfish.
No, they do. They have the chocolate. So we were at Ventureland, and I stopped. And I got green beans and a bottle of water. I thought, you know what, he probably should have something better to eat. So they have that little restaurants. We got the fried chicken, the mashed potatoes, the green beans, the baked beans. So he's eating green beans, right? Because I actually didn't think he could eat real food until he bit me one day. I'm at the computer and he came up and he bit me. I'm like, oh, he has teeth. So then we started having chicken nuggets and fries and.
I can tell you, and my mother, Grandma, has also introduced me to McDonald's, and so I didn't do that. My wife blamed me for that, but I can assure you that. So there is the grandparent effect. And so you know who I am. So that's really who I've been or who I am. And then in February, my father this year passed away, and got me thinking a lot about life and things. And he was, like I said, he just a farmer, not just. He was a farmer and also an activist and county supervisor. And he really never wanted to run for Congress, the U.S. Senate, or governor, or anything like that. He took great pride in the fact that someone needed to care about those basic things in life. And why county supervisor was partisan, he was doing it for the job. I remember the big thing with him was Meals on Wheels, but always the roads. It was the basics in life. And somehow I just think Washington has been broken for all of us. And so a lot of life events got me thinking about, when I was watching this race, that maybe I would get in this race. And so I decided to get in. And frankly, what finally was the tipping point for me was the father that got killed in front of his 3 kids. And I thought, we're not talking enough about public safety and the real core issues that go around it.
Well, I know, and not to make light of it, when my father passed away, I actually was the one who found him. I got a tattoo and was going to get my ears pierced, but I didn't like the idea of the crappy earring that you have to have for 6 weeks.
Oh, I know.
So I'm like, that's just going to mess up my style completely. So no ear pierced. But so family is kind of what made you decide to return to politics, because for those of us who've escaped, I was elected, you were elected, and people really don't understand that when you get away from it, there is often this sense of relief.
Oh yes,
and to come back.
Mm-hmm.
Is
a mental health issue?
Because you know what you're getting. Here's the thing: the first time you get in, you have no idea what you're getting into.
Correct.
When you come back, you actually know what you're getting into.
Yeah.
So it takes a lot to bring us back.
I think that's correct. I mean, I think that's probably that's a very accurate statement, and it's true. You know, when I first was elected, I had no idea what the job really entailed. But that's one of the reasons I think it'd be effective. I know that Christine Hensley's not running; she's been there for 24 years. And when you run the ball for 24 years, you know, like I said to some folks in the day, when you're running play-by-play 3 yards at a time with a football day after day, you're going to get broken down. I mean, after a while. And 24 years, as you know, John, in local government, whether it's school board or city council, that's a long time. And I think it's
Without a break.
Without a break, yeah. And I think that's going to. And so you know, a lot of people ask me whether. I mean, I disagree with her on the water issue, but I agree with her on a lot of other things she did for the city. I think there was that people don't give credit where credit was due on certain things, but and that's, as you know, it's hindsight in this business. People will look back and say, oh, they did do this or they did do that, and probably years after you're gone. But I think there's a large void that's going to happen at City Hall because of that kind of institutional knowledge walking out the door from 24 years. I think that I can bring some experience back to that, and I think we have a lot going for us. There's a ton of progress, and I look at Des Moines and say, wow, look at where we're headed. I mean, if you think about where we could be in another 10 years. So I do think City Hall has been we really had to give away a lot to get things happening in Des Moines back when I was on the council. You remember where Java Joe's right now, but I remember when this was really one of the only places in downtown Des Moines. And now you look around and it's exceeded all the expectations I could have.
Well, the street level died.
Well, yeah, street level died, but I mean, but I'm just saying, like, I think that, you know, the downtown progress has been great, and now I think they've got to be careful about how much you give away, because I don't think you need to attract development downtown, and I think you got to start taking a look at the neighborhoods too, because neighborhoods are going to, I think those neighborhood commercial districts are extremely important. When I first ran for the city council, the analogy was, it was like an apple. If anything was rotten at the core, everything outside of it would rot. And I look at downtown Des Moines today and say, you know, a different analogy today for me would be, this downtown Des Moines is a strong heartbeat. But if all your arteries to your heart are bad, your heart, it doesn't matter how strong your heart is, you know. And so, so anyways, you wanted a little bit about me and why I was running, and that's just a couple things I could throw out there.
Now, is it fair to say that Des Moines has become two cities? Would that be a fair characterization? And if so, why? If not, why?
Well, I think that, and to your point, one of the biggest things that in this race that has been, or one of the larger questions has been about like affordable housing, and those that have been kind of left behind it with equity or pay positions, and saying like, well, is there a tale of two cities here? I mean, while we're getting rated number one by, you know, Forbes and all these things for best.
But isn't that really a myth? The metro is being rated that, not the city.
Well, I don't know so you've always been a smarter guy than me, so I don't know. I don't know the intricacies of that, but I'm saying, to your point, I think that we do have issues like that we need to address. I do think you have to take a look and be somewhat creative about your affordable housing stock, especially if you take a look at the federal, like the subsidies that are going to come down from the federal government to help affordable housing. Those are going to get any better, as we know.
Well, let me ask you about what is affordable housing, because we use this generic term.
Yeah.
And there doesn't seem to be a concrete definition of what affordable housing is, especially connected to what people can afford who live in this community. So what is your definition or standard for affordable housing?
Well, you just said it. I mean, it's basically, if you look at what the income levels that people have and what they can afford for quality, decent, clean, livable housing. And so I don't have the exact definition by the HUD guidelines or something like that. But to the point, I think that what was it? There are 5,000 homes that are on the rental list that are substandard with money. That seems pretty bad. I mean, they're classified by Des Moines, from my understanding, as substandard. So I think that what you got to take a look at is, I mean, is there that stock there for people? Are the wages matching up with the housing? And what they're saying here is that they need more low-income housing, that more affordable low-income housing, because that's what you're really saying. To a lot of folks, as affordable means that you don't have as high incomes.
I had an elderly lady who she's now living with her son, and she said she looked at affordable housing, a new affordable housing development, and this is just what she told me. I didn't do any independent confirmation to get that on the record, but she said she looked into this affordable housing complex, and it would have cost her $1,500 a month.
That doesn't sound very affordable.
And that's why I asked what is affordable, because it seems, based upon the limited examination that I've done, that the definition of affordable housing is what we can get a subsidy for from the state or the federal government to make developers rich, not building housing that people can actually afford to live in.
Well, I think...
And if that's not fair, then just, I mean...
No, I'd tell you, we've known each other a long time, that I think the other piece of it is that I mean, there's no doubt, even if the developers you talk to said there needs to be more housing. I mean, it's a fact. I mean, whether you want to call it affordable, you want to call it low income, whatever you want to call it, it's missing. And for some people, I mean, what they compared us to, what city says, I forget now. We have Worston, is it Brooklyn? I forget the cities, but I mean, pretty marketable statistics. And while, you see all these beautiful apartments going in downtown that are, market rate, we need to take a look at everybody in Des Moines. And I know I'm running for Ward 3, but it's still, I think, to make a city great, you have to look at all aspects of the city, even if that isn't really defined in your ward.
Well, and that was the question I was going to ask you, is are you going to be the Ward 3 representative, or are you going to be the city representative? You mentioned Christine earlier, and I've often defended Christine because Christine represented her ward.
Yeah.
She represented her ward, and so she did that. She didn't lie about it. She didn't say she was something that she wasn't.
Yeah.
And one of the concerns that I have is that we so often get individuals who talk about the city, but then once they get to the city council, they are representatives for vested interests or special interests, but they're not actually addressing the whole city. So again, I was going to ask you, are you going to be the Ward 3 guy, or are you going to be the City of Des Moines person?
Well, I'll answer that question by saying that I wasn't at large city council member. So I love the city in its entirety, but yeah, at the end of the day, you got to fight for that Ward 3 because they have 2 at-large spots. And so if I was to sit here and say I have to still, moreover, fight for Ward 3, because that, to me, if I look at the office itself and say, well, you have 2 at-large spots, I have to do that for Ward 3. I'm the one voice. But I'm not.
We have 2 at-large representatives.
Yeah.
Okay. I only asked that because I have.
I was like, but in that window, is this a trick question?
No, ironically, I said.
Sunday morning, by the way.
Listen, ironically, well, and the interesting thing is this is Sunday morning, and I had to like chew on a cinder block before we started this interview.
I was like, John, don't trick me now.
No, I had to start. Well, the reason I asked that is because I've done these interviews over the years, and I have politicians who promise so many things, and we keep those records, Chris Coleman's not running for re-election, but he and I sat down a few days ago.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, we did. And Skip Moore has been unavailable for interview or accountability since getting elected.
Oh.
And so that's why when you said we have 2 at-larges, from our perspective, I mean,
now I get
Skip Moore got elected. And this is something I will give you credit for. after you got elected, you were just as accessible as before.
Yeah. I could tell you where I live if you wanted to come to my front door.
And I mean, I remember Skip Moore coming over to my house, and because he was in a tough race with Dave Alderman and Alicia Barkis.
Yeah, about that.
And then after he got elected, he's pretty much been just absent. And to me, that's important because since that election, you're in an election cycle. Then the last 2 election cycles, the functional poverty rate has increased nearly 25%, and you now have a functional poverty rate in Des Moines more than 76. 76% of the families in this community can't feed their kids without assistance. It's not just a data point, though. We have kids who literally aren't eating from the moment they leave school until they get back to school. Our schools now have washing machines because parents can't do the basics like provide clean clothes for their kids. The murder rate has nearly quadrupled since 2007. From 2007 to 2015, it nearly quadrupled. And that doesn't take into account that we are in the midst of a record homicide and violence spree in this community. We had a grandmother gunned down at 13th and University, and the city council doesn't seem to give a damn. And I live in your ward, so I'm going to be voting for one of the 3 of you.
Sure.
And I've called, my neighbors have called about this big, and I love dogs. I had a pit chow mix. It has a pit bull's head, but it has a Rottweiler's body, and it's been running around the neighborhood day after day, not only crapping all over the place, but it could maul children or the old people, and nothing's been done. I doubt that would have been the case if I lived south of Grand and said we have kids and we have a giant, mountain lion sized dangerous animal according to the city.
Right.
Cold running loose. I mean, this thing is huge.
No, I know.
This huge just comes to here, and it's running loose.
What's exactly your address? Because I'm not coming around, I'm not door knocking around your neighborhood. I can tell you that right now.
I'm just saying. And no one's. So I mean, how do we get away from the type of favoritism, the type of selective?
That's what it comes down to.
Because I know where I live. I chose to live where I live. Where I live, it's a different city government than where South of Grand is.
Well, one of the things that I take pride in the most, and actually, if you look at, I don't know if you do the Facebook thing and look, I posted it because it meant a lot to me. I saved it. I didn't bring it with me today, so I don't carry it around. But people always ask me, what was the biggest thing you did on the city council? Like was it vote for Gateway West or the East Village? Court Avenue didn't exist. All these projects. Or 8035, creating a music commission. Were those things? No. Actually, one of the things probably that moves me the most is I have a woman wrote a letter to the editor, and I remember her. It was after our baby was born, 2 years ago actually. She wrote a letter to the editor and said she wanted to write about me. You always. And she said she remembered when she lived in a trailer park here in Des Moines, and the city had kept continually coming out and picking up her stuff and finding her. And then they would leave a fine on the door, and she kept making calls to City Hall, and I answered the call, and I came out there, and I stopped them. And so I think sometimes the biggest thing in a local government, it's not all these large, I've always talked about the large vision, and what's the grand plan, and it's about being accountable. This isn't Washington, D.C. There is no spin zone. There is no, at least there shouldn't be in local government. It's about the little things you do for people. That's what they remember. Because if the little things in life don't function for you, none of the greater debate matters, right? So that's how I feel about it.
Why should people vote for you instead of voting for your opponents? I mean, you have 2 young opponents, young, ambitious, this is what Des Moines Citizens wants to be about. Why should people in Ward 3 vote for you instead of vote for them?
Well, I guess at the end of the day, I would tell you that I believe that experience does matter here to some extent. When we're talking about the vacancy that we're going to have in this ward, I think that it matters. And I also got to tell you something too. Everybody's like, these guys are so much younger. I think they might be 5 years younger, but maybe I just didn't age well. So I don't know. I don't know what the cutoff for being young is anymore. I mean, we got started very, very young in public service, but I think 42 is still young, and I think that it's about hitting the ground running.
You would be a senior, they would be freshmen.
Okay, all right.
So I mean, the age difference is not that.
No, I mean that's why. But it's funny because some people have said that, and now I have. I think the only person who hasn't run for office in this seat is Omar. I know that Josh has run for office before, and I've run for office before. So we both. So in terms of, and the age difference isn't that much, but I think it comes down to really also looking and saying, what's it take to move the city forward? And I believe it's more than just one issue. I believe that it's a multitude of issues, and that it is about.
So what is it going to take to move the city forward? Because I'm a data guy, right?
Yeah.
That's irritating to some people. But here in, it's not just that I'm a data guy as it looks Des Moines. We are reaching out to West Des Moines candidates and Ankeny candidates and candidates in Shadal and Mitchellville and Grimes. I just got back a questionnaire from a Grimes City Council candidate. And there is a demonstrable difference between the issues facing those communities and the issues facing this community. If we were not so political as leadership, I think a compelling case could be made to declare a state of emergency for Des Moines based upon the hard demographics, based upon the level of functional poverty, based upon the level of functional vulnerability. By functional vulnerability, I mean when the federal government shuts down, the president keeps his promise, and he's kept a lot of promises to the dismay of some and the delight of others, right? But he's kept some promises, right?
Yeah, I would. It's interesting.
So if he keeps his promise and shuts down the federal government next spring, the level of vulnerability increases because now you have seniors who are worried about how they're going to eat. You don't have the same level of vulnerability in an Ankeny or a Johnston. So when you look at the violence, when you look at the drug addiction, when you look at the instability of neighborhoods, when you have people getting shot, families don't want to move in. So,
or dogs,
or giant dogs run loose. So how do we, beyond because I will say this, on an aggregated basis, the partnership and regional leadership has much to celebrate. But when we look at the city of Des Moines and the hard data, I think a compelling argument could be made that we need almost a declaration of a state of emergency because of some very real data points. So how do we turn the city around? How do we grow this city? Not just downtown, but how do we actually grow and nurture and support the people of the city from City Hall?
Well, I would say to you that I don't have all the answers. I think that's also important for people running for office to say that they don't have every answer, but they know that there's. If you take a look at the city budget problems right now, there's some major issues facing the city. That's whether it's the police pension fund or the revenue streams that. Look, you know this as well. 48%, I think 47% of all taxpayers in Des Moines pay for 100% of the goods and services. All nonprofits pay for no police fire support. I think that's a strain on people living in Des Moines. If you think about every time you had to go out to eat or anything you did, I charged you twice as much money for whatever somebody else is paying, once for. That's quite a strain. So I actually think what we all need to do is realize that, to my point earlier to you, was that we're one Des Moines, and I believe we're also one Iowa. We got to work together with the legislature to say to them, that we need your help. We need you to pass laws that help us change the way we do business in Des Moines, change our revenue streams.
Doesn't Des Moines, to a degree, suffer from a credibility problem? We look at the fee debacle. That was brought on by decisions made from people sitting on city council.
I was there.
And then they needed, so
I didn't vote for it.
But I'm saying,
in terms of,
but the perception is that the city brought this on themselves. They brought the city made the conscious decision to go $300 million in debt. The city made the conscious decision to prioritize downtown development over police athletic league. So, I mean,
I love the POW is a great program, by the way.
So I mean, there are some perception issues that exist.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm sure there are always, I think, some, it's all basically perception issues based on who you ask, but I think you've got to have, to make a city strong, you've got to have those core services. I mean, public safety is number one. I know we talk about clean drinking water. I think we have a great Des Moines Water Works. I think Bill Stowe does a great job. And we do have some of the cleanest drinking water in the country, by the way. No matter what other folks say, we have some of the cleanest drinking water, but that's a separate utility. And for the city, it's about those core services and providing those core services, but also, I think Tom Harkin gave a speech years ago that I loved and remember as a kid. It was always about leaving the ladder down for everybody. I mean, you could climb the ladder if you wanted to, or not, but it was always, the ladder would always be there for people, and I just remember that speech. And I think to answer to your point, there's tough decisions, as you know from being in local government and on the school board. They're going to come at you all the time. But it's about your philosophy, and it's about how you look at the job. And I think it's also about saying, when you're in a local government position, that it's not about running for higher office and doing these other things, because will that impede your decisions on the local level? Because you're worried about how that looks if you decide to run for another office. I think those are because local governments have always been unique, meaning that the decisions it's not Washington, it's not the State House.
Do our city leaders care about the people? I'll give.
John, you know they.
Well, no, but let me. And I have to ask these questions because let me give you an example. We got people getting killed in the inner city. I talked to Bill Gray the other day. I interviewed him, and I said, Bill, I doubt if people were being killed south of Grand like they were being killed in the inner city, that we'd see the same reaction. And we know that when Phil Davis was killed, there was an entirely different reaction. There was an entirely different reaction than when all those other folks who didn't matter got killed. Now, I said, one of the arguments has been, well, we really can't do a lot because we don't know what the license plates are or see whatever when people drive and they commit these crimes. I said, yeah, but we can put cameras on poles and stuff. Well, you know what? There are cameras and poles that are down here on Court Avenue, so that if somebody gets shot, we'll know who did it. But where people are getting killed, there aren't. That seems to be a leadership decision and a priority decision versus a resource decision. So again, literally in a community, and nothing's been done, but we've instituted safety measures in places where the problems don't exist. Isn't it fair to ask, do people actually care about the fact that a grandma can be gunned down in the middle of Des Moines, in daylight, in the inner city?
Well, I think...
Because they haven't done the things that can stop it.
Well, I do think people care. I don't want to say, I do think people care. But I also tell you this, that's what we're talking about, public safety. I don't know about the camera issue in particular, but I can tell you that it's one of the reasons I took it before that why I ran was, when the father gets gunned down in front of his 3 kids, I don't think we've been talking enough about it. And understanding public safety, and understanding what we're dealing with in Des Moines right now. The fact that I think you've got a mental health care crisis on your hands, and police officers are on the front lines of that, and that's taking away, right? That's taking away from the resources they have, and that's really been I don't want to say a burden, but in a way, for law enforcement, it's taken away a lot of their attention from violent crimes, and they need help. I think that the Des Moines Police Department is trying their hardest right now. I think they've had a lot of retirements, and they're not up to force completely. But I think they are trying. I do think people care.
Well, I didn't say the police didn't care.
Oh,
but the police.
Okay.
But the police aren't the boss. you know, it wasn't Chief Wingard who made the decisions to put cameras on Court Avenue instead of on 13th and University. So, I mean, I'm not attacking the police.
Oh no, I don't think you're attacking anyone.
I'm talking about the council. It's the council that made the decision to go $300 million in debt to build downtown so the folks from the suburbs can drive in and have a good time and then drive out with the money they make down here, while ignoring the fact that we now have 75% of the people who live in this community, 75% of the families that live in this community with kids in our schools that cannot feed them.
Well,
I mean, it's the council that made the decision about priorities.
well,
No
I agree.
one else.
I agree with the priorities. So to answer you, I don't know about the camera. And you have to be honest, when you don't know something, I really
Sure.
don't have the details about the cameras. But I can say that public safety has to be a priority. And yeah, to your point, usually when they set a budget for the city, you come in and you talk about priorities. What priorities are and they have to be pushed up. I think that the city council needs to make their voice heard in this budget cycle and say everything else is going to take second seat until we know for sure that public safety's got everything they need.
What are some of the issues that you are committed to that we haven't touched on? Because I try to give everybody a chance
Sure.
to talk about, you know, some of the issues they care about. I'll be honest, sometimes by the time we reach this point, folks have been traumatized to the point they don't remember what else they care about.
Oh, John,
but I know that's not true.
That's not true with me. There goes that experience piece, right? I appreciate you having me, and actually, I'd stick around longer, but I have a son's birthday party
Sure.
to get to.
So there's no other issues that you can think of that you want to talk about.
I say this race comes down to three things: it's public safety, potholes, and progress. And really, it's a beta about these core services and showing people that we can make government work. While it seems like our national government's dysfunctional, I think that local government can work for people.
Do you want to give out your email address, number?
Sure,
Do
if people want to get in touch with the campaign, it's KiernanForCouncil@gmail.com, and it's KiernanForCouncil.com if you'd like to get in touch with the website too.
Okay.
Thank you,
Thank you,
sir.
Michael.
I appreciate it.